embarrassing because you're there saying, okay, you want your money, and then you start going like this, you say, yeah. But, or you could say, excuse me, while we're out like from playing sounds. But that's really important, and there will be people who will be looking to rip you off.
There are a lot of like entertainers and stuff. They come to your table while you're at the cafe and like the plaza. They come up and like they're expecting money. Just you have to. You gotta feel me.
What do you say? You say no grazie, right? Yeah. You learn to say that very fast. If you are surrounded, if you go alone, if you're surrounded by groups of small children who come up saying, "Hello, sir," patting your whatever, you start yelling and swinging your arms and run away as soon as possible. There are people
People
who
try
try
to bump into you on like subways and things and in like crowded places.
Somebody lost their wallet on the subway in Barcelona.
That was
Jeremiah.
Barcelona has the worst, but Italy is not going to do this.
Not as bad, but, and it won't be there in the peak of tourist season, but, you know, you're vulnerable, we're all vulnerable, so
Yeah.
just be smart.
And yeah, just don't be stupid about it. Don't, you know, throw your wallet into somebody.
Don't leave your bag unattended on the bench.
Yeah.
That's, I don't want to get that. Okay. You ready? Well, thank you guys. So be careful about your weight. Yeah, you don't want to get stuck paying a ton of extra money.
Was there any, are there any provisions at all to be able to like, you know, like wash your underwear or do anything like that? Or should you
They're
take?
safe, each of you will have your own bathroom.
Bring a couple of clothespins.
Bring some
Okay.
clothespins and, you know, bring a little, there's a washing fluid in a bottle.
Yeah.
And you can wash your.
Yeah, and you can just hang your undergarments on like the shower curtain or things like that if you really want them to dry.
You just get used to it. You don't need to bring, you don't need to bring heavy clothes for warm weather. You won't be happy. Okay, so don't bring it.
Well, I've been looking
Cold
for cold weather.
Cold weather, cold weather.
But it's actually, I've been looking at the temperature over there. and
It
it's
could be like it is right now,
It's
in
very
which
similar.
case you'll want a
Yeah.
sweater, could get cool at night.
Maybe a light sweater.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Emily asked me a good question, just about, you know, when we go into churches, ladies,
Oh, very
if it's
important.
hot, you know, and you're wearing a tank shirt or something that's sleeveless, just throw into your bag, I meant to bring mine down, but just a really light scarf
No
thing,
short shorts.
no
In
short
fact,
shorts.
In many cases, women, if
Men.
you're wearing, and men too. Now, generally, they are not as tough on men, but it's for women, they're tough. If you're wearing short shorts or a really short skirt, they might reject. So that's why when we were in Barcelona on our first day, going into the cathedral, the only place where they enforced this rule, women had to buy either a scarf that was sold by women in front, just for this purpose, to put a little more covering here, or over their shoulders.
Yeah. I cannot stress the importance of wearing comfortable shoes.
Oh, God.
Because we will be walking a lot. And our first full day there, we were going up to Fiesole and we are walking down, and that's going to be, well, I would actually recommend doing a little practice walking if you're not used to doing a lot of walking.
Have your
Because-
shoes broken in.
Yeah, have your shoes broken in, but also just, you know, I mean, it's not going to be carrying a heavy pack, but, you know, I would recommend bringing a water bottle that you know, don't mind hiking with, and, you know, something, a backpack that so you can carry it in. You know, there'll be days when we're going to say, pick up a lunch to bring along with you so you can carry something in your, you know, your bag. So, it's not serious hiking, but you want to be ready to kind of just
They're
go.
hard surfaces, so flip-flops are just not going to do it.
No.
I would also suggest that you buy moleskin, which is you can get at the pharmacy, which is a really great padding for your feet. You cut it out with little scissors, so if you get a blister or whatever, it allows you to go on. Do not take any sharp objects in your carry-on items in case you haven't flown recently, so that includes nail clippers, no Swiss Army knives, that has to be in your check load.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep. Any general questions like that? And if you don't have any or want to say them out loud, then just email me. Okay?
Well, I just have a question. I know like you're not supposed to bring like white sneakers, but do people wear gray sneakers?
Yeah.
Okay.
And, you know, white sneakers, you have people look at you, but big people.
What's with white
Yeah, like
sneakers?
What's with white
taboo.
sneakers? I
I
didn't know.
heard that no one wears white sneakers. So you're
No,
You know what, if the Americans are wearing white sneakers, they'll want to wear my white sneakers. I mean, they still are quite enamored of things that we do, even if they kind of look down their nose at us about other things.
and you'll see lots of Germans and Central Europeans wearing socks with sandals. So, you shouldn't worry about that. But I have some more tips in this.
We have a running documentary of all the socks and sandals that we see. You know, the
I like it.
purses, all the Italian man
Sand
purses,
purses,
all
right.
the Italian
Fanny packs
profiles.
are something, if you wear a fanny pack, make sure you wear it in front. That is something that often tips you off as being an American.
Okay, and I'm just gonna say, I do have copies of the updated itinerary, so make sure you get that. I also have a very important card here, these little yellow cards, I think that Marcia talked about these. These are, you know, the emergency contact numbers, and I wanna make sure that, we'll do this at the end, that you each get one of these. The only problem is, I'm not sure whether or not my cell phone number is I can take my number with me. And I don't know if you know that yet, because I'll want to be able to contact you guys all when we're there. So as I figure out how to do that with my phone, I'll make sure that you do the same. Okay? So, all right, let's get started.
Okay, so you know who I am, most of you have these. Mark's travel rules. Always be on time, never fall behind. This is the most important first rule. Your two teachers are going to be on edge because they're having to carry and care for everything. And they're going to be thinking ahead about where they need to go, etc. The last thing they need is somebody who hasn't shown up, still asleep. They're going to have somebody wake you up every morning, that's one thing. But you've always got to be there because if you don't show up, literally everybody falls. And it screws up a very tight schedule that you guys have. It also means that when they're walking together, I mean, I've given 1,000 tours at this point. I know how it is. People stretch out. They start lingering and people hang out at the back. You can't do that. You got to all hang together. If you don't make the crosswalk, it just takes up more time, et cetera, et cetera. So, A, don't do that. Never, ever. It will affect your grade if you do, if you end up missing some classes. Standard. Be prepared. Yes, money. In the morning, make sure you have enough money and you have change in case they're taking a bus or something, or find out the day before what the money needs are going to be, because let's face it, as you're about to go into a place, the last thing they want to hear is, I don't have any money. Okay, so you want to be prepared for all of those days. First aid, moleskins, aspirin, that kind of stuff, Benadryl, it's good. A drunk tourist is a stupid tourist. Okay. Now, that's because if you're a drunk tourist outside, if there are bad people around, you'll become an instant target if you are a drunken tourist. So you want to really watch yourself and be careful. But I also want you to enjoy yourself because Prosecco, which is their sparkling wine, like champagne, is the perfect drink in the late afternoon after a long day of walking. I like it a lot. They named this one after me. You can see there, Lamar. So I want you to enjoy yourselves, but frankly, if you go out and get shit-faced and you're trying to find your way at home at night, it's likely that something bad might happen to you. So be very careful. Light and smile. It's really, really important. You just got to keep on being not the ugly American, as the famous phrase goes, but the friendly, interested, and bubbly American. I would say everybody should model Cassandra. She's naturally very good at that. And so let her do the talking for you. And just don't walk up to somebody and start talking to them in English. They'll consider it rude. You should learn how to say, if not in Italian, io non parlo italiano, parlo inglese. It's pretty easy to do. They can say yes or no, or you can say, do you speak English? And try to look pathetic and sad, okay, because that'll probably help too. So, again, just don't go up and say, hey, where's the Duomo? It's not going to be nice in their country to you to just start yakking in English out. Avoid unnecessary displays of nationalism. Leave your USA #1 t-shirt at home, please. It's just likely to get you pissed off. Cost your money and other valuables. Well, we already talked about that. If you have a purse that's just hanging off the side, or even a camera hanging off the side, somebody can grab it and run. Somebody who was one of the teachers of last year's tour was in Barcelona a few years earlier, and somebody came and grabbed the camera off the strap off of his arm and just ran with it. So again, you have to be conscious of that. I usually put a camera around my neck. That's harder. They got to really yank your neck to get, get the camera again. And again, I would get a really great money pouch of some kind. Don't be afraid though. Italy is still much safer than Philadelphia. That probably isn't saying much, but nevertheless, let's face it, this is a more dangerous city in terms of violence and stuff like that, so I'm not trying to freak you out unduly. Now, once you've mastered all those other things, you should really make an effort to explore the city on your own, because you'll probably see more than you would if you just traveled in a group of people. So when you have time off, feel free to wander around. Just have a map with you, because it'll be amazing. You'll meet people, you'll talk to them, and you'll see great stuff maybe that you wouldn't notice otherwise. On class trips, maybe I should put this second, never ever talk while your teachers, tour guides, or peers are making presentations. It's rude and you will miss things. This is really important. You're going there to learn. And who's going to be teaching you? Your tour guides, your teachers are going to be giving talks and presentations, but most importantly, you guys are all making presentations over there. And you've got to really listen to those. So we usually sat down if there was enough space or whatever, and everybody's just focused on that person talking. So no whispering, no talking, that stuff. It really is rude to the speaker. Okay. Now, in terms of what I'm talking about tonight, first of all, you know I'm technologically challenged, so I put together this PowerPoint that unfortunately seems to crash about 3/5 of the way through. So we're going to shift to slides there again. But in talking to Rachel, I decided to talk about certain things. Mostly what I'm talking about is beyond Florence, the things that you can go see in the time that you have off. You have 2.5 days off during your tour, before or after. Other things I just want to refresh your memory about, because many of these things I've talked about in class already. But also other stuff that your other speakers haven't presented, because you've got the Etruscans, you've got the Romans, you've got the Renaissance, and I believe maybe even some of the Baroque. But Italian architecture obviously continued on. There's lots of neoclassical stuff within the city that was attempting to fit into the Renaissance. But in the 20th century, there's also some interesting buildings. Now, Florence was one of those places that was always very cognizant of its heritage. So breaking out of the shell of historicism is going to be a little bit hard for them. But there are some amazing examples in the city of some 20th century architecture if you look for them. There are some Art Nouveau buildings. I don't know if anybody's still looking for a paper topic, but this would be a great one to do. This is a house by Giovanni Michelozzi. And he was an Art Nouveau architect, and what you see is a building with metal ornamentation, ceramic ornamentation. It's a private house. In Italy, they tended to call the Art Nouveau the style Liberty, after Liberty of London, which was a very famous store that sold things like William Morris fabrics. And Florence has some of this stuff. Actually, the city of Lucca, if any of you go there, has a lot of it. But this is a building I hope you get to see. It's in central Florence, and it's a trip. It is worthy of any building in Brussels, which is kind of the headquarters of Art Nouveau, also by Michelozzi. An extraordinary building that is both looking to history, but also stepping pretty far away from it with some dramatic geometry, right? And also an extraordinary detailing done in stone and in metal. Stuff that also has almost kind of psychological kind of impact to it. Not so surprisingly, this is work that's done after Freud and other people are publishing their early ideas about the subconscious. And so you start seeing interesting symbolism and stuff creeping into these buildings. Yeah, look at how that window is framed in metal there. Just amazing stuff. So a mixture of historicist, innovative ideas, new materials, etc. But probably the most important modern building in the city of Florence, and you'll all be seeing it, most of you will be arriving through it, is going to be their train station. Now the train station replaced an older one that was decayed. And it's right by Santa Maria Novella, the church by Alberti that you'll be visiting. And so that's why it got that particular name. But it's interesting because it was a very modern building for, again, this city that everybody knows is the birthplace of the Renaissance and has ancient roots. The fact that Mussolini allowed it to be built was thought to be kind of encouraging by some architects, that Mussolini wouldn't be as discouraging of modernism the way that Hitler was, obviously. But it was done by two architects in general, the Tuscany group, Italo Gambarini and Giovanni Michelucci, and then Angelo Mazzoni was actually the designer for the trains, and he did a lot of the actually seats as well as the tracks and stuff like that. But it is an asymmetrical, very modern, very sleek building that is using some stone and brick, but also glass in a way that gave great heart to at least modernist architects in Italy. I'll remember my first time going into Florence. I took an overnight train from Switzerland, and I get into the morning, I'm very dreary and drowsy. I get off the train, and the first thing I see is graffiti on a post, and it says, Iggy Pop. And I thought, I've arrived at the birthplace of the Renaissance. The first words I see are Iggy Pop. Anyway, then I stumbled to a bar where I had my first espresso, which helped wake me up. But it's a cool, rather serene, also in need of care. It has graffiti around it, as you will see. Most of the recent pictures I've seen and looking for these pictures have shown a certain amount of graffiti, but elegant interior that really was showing the potential of modernism to escape from historical roots. So anyway, you will definitely be in here. Now, one of those architects later had a career that was really fascinating, and the high point of that career, a building that really put him on the international map, is this one. And I've talked to Rachel, and you may be going to it. It is San Giovanni Battista, St. John the Baptist, but its common name is the Church of the Autostrada, because it's right by the Autostrada, their highway. And it was actually meant to kind of satisfy travelers who might stop by near Florence. And in this building, Michelucci is really going into some extraordinary directions that in some ways parallel other architects of the period who were advanced. Le Corbusier is getting away from a kind of rigid rectilinear modernism into more sculptural values, but also using an interesting mix of materials refined and rough that reminds us of other famous architects, and my name right now is making me crazy. Dennis?
Santillan? Or no what?
Dennis.
Oh.
Scarpa.
Scarpa, who, you know, does amazing things where he's combining old, rough stone walls with concrete. Well, similar here. I'm hoping you'll get to see it because it is I've actually never been in it myself, but it seems like an extraordinary building, especially for its interior values that, again, it doesn't surprise me that they put this on the outskirts of Florence, you know what I mean, since it flies in the face of historical practice so dramatically, but beautiful, obviously, when it comes to an expression of structure that is both kind of ancient in its feeling, but also distinctly modern. It could almost be like a tent that's propped up by poles, except for their concrete, and a concrete roof with a copper on the outside. Oh, sorry, obviously did not turn out very well. Some sketches of the gentleman himself. Another sketch, wonderful sketch, I think, for inspiring you guys.
It really looks like the Antinori vineyard where we're going is
Yeah.
influenced by this.
Very much so. I mean, this is the local touchstone for modernists, you know, out of the train station. So anyway, beyond Florence. So here you go, Firenze, Florence. And this is Tuscany. These are the different regions of Tuscany that have these different colors here. And I have a question for you guys. In your 2.5 days off, have any of you thought about where you're going yet, or have you decided? Yeah.
Cinque Terre?
The Cinque Terre in the north, outside of Tuscany. Very beautiful, very scenic, yeah. Rome, okay. Rome. Okay, well, I was going to try to discourage you from that, from going to Rome, partly because, well, Rome is without parallel, right? Rome is astonishing. But you have to go pretty far, although they do have express trains that come back, and it's a big city. And that's going to be overwhelming in the short time you're going to be there. If you haven't made decisions otherwise, and if you have time to maybe go to Rome at the end or before you show up, I would say that honestly spending your time in Tuscany and going to a smaller place would be maybe of greater value for you. Also maybe a little relaxing as well. So we're going to look around. And these places are available to get to easily by train or by bus. So here's Firenze. We're going to talk about Siena, which you guys will be going to with the class. I'm also going to talk about Lucca up here, Pisa, right on the ocean. Again, very easy to get to. I'm going to show you slides of San Gimignano, another place I recommend going to if you can.
We are going.
And, which is incredible. And then outside, nearby in Umbria, there are places like, what about now? There are places like Assisi, where St. Francis was. Now I'm going to show you, what I'm now about to do is just show you different pictures of different places that you might visit, and hopefully this will stimulate your appetite for travel to those places. Tuscany is filled with beautiful hill towns, like this little one that nobody goes to, Lucignano. Because there's so many of them, is that tourists tend to concentrate on the big ones. They're the most famous ones, San Gimignano, Siena, etc. But it's astonishing if you have extra time to spend where you could just go for an afternoon on a train from Florence and see. This is a town that grew up on a hilltop, and you know why they did that, for defensive purposes, right? And when I talked about urbanism in the Middle Ages, I talked about organic pattern of development. You all remember that. Well, here's one that kind of grew up in rings as it got larger and larger, as it's kind of falling down the hill around it. And what you'll notice in these wonderful little towns is, again, the most felicitous combination of narrowness and openness and shade and shadow and intimacy and community. That it's hard for us to imagine, since it's so completely different from the kind of lifestyle that we experience here in the United States. But they are marvelous, and something to remember is this, is that these towns in Italy served as laboratories for Camillo Sica. Now, I've mentioned him in my survey class, and Sica was an Austrian who lived in the 19th century. And he hated what was happening in Europe in the aftermath of the replanning of Paris, all that neo-Baroque broad boulevards, huge streets that plastered through the old medieval urban centers. He said, oh, you're losing all the intimacy that makes the city great and wonderful. So he went and studied squares, irregular squares, in Siena and other Tuscan hill towns, and tried to figure out what was the ideal thing, how many openings were into them, where's the placement of the church, because they were all irregular. He was actually trying to find, I hate to use the phrase, but a pattern language about what made a successful square in an organic pattern. Now what's amazing is that decades later, in the 20th century, a very influential architect in the 1970s and 80s was named Christopher Alexander, who published some very popular books that everybody had when we were young, called a pattern language, in which he also looked at things and tried to discern patterns that people naturally, instinctively responded to. So, again, this is something that I would hope you guys get a chance to, because you're going to be in Florence. Florence is not an organic medieval city, partly because it had that amazing grid that was laid out by the Romans that was maintained, so it has those broad boulevards, etc. Siena is very organic. It's more of a city of San Gimignano as well, so you will have those experiences. But there's nothing like it. They're really glorious places to be. 150 years ago, they weren't, because there was shit everywhere, literally. Remember, I talked about that in class. People throw their crap out the windows. There's no sanitation, no running water. It's all cleaned up now. So here's another one of these beautiful towns. When I was in this little square, I expected somebody to come out of that park and start singing opera. I mean, it's that kind of thing. Or the famous Assisi. Now, some of you might want to be a pilgrim and go to Assisi, because it's where St. Francis was from. It's in Umbria, but it's near Tuscany. And it's exquisite. It's one of those hill towns. It was the hometown of St. Francis. And it's still a beautiful medieval town in terms of its layout, and it has the incredible Gothic Basilica of St. Francis that most of you have memorized from my class. So if you want to go venerate one of the great figures of the Western world, one of the most humane figures, the patron saint of ecology, he's here. It's got a wonderful square, very organic, something that's very important in all of these towns. Whenever you see a fountain, you should be aware of that being a focus of community life before people had running water, which means until very recently. Running water is made by either wealthy people or the government, who brings an aqueduct in to supply the city with water, because you come down here with a bucket to get your daily water. It's really crucial. It is going to be the focus of life. And we've lost track of it. I mean, if you even go back to the Bible, it talks about the woman by the well and these encounters that people have. Right off the side of this, though, is in fact a Roman temple front, because Assisi was a Roman settlement earlier on, although it's lost practically all traces of its original Roman pattern of development. What you'll also note here is that I happen to be there on market day. The all these towns have different market days when people come in from the countryside and sell their wares or their crafts or whatever. And that's also a great experience. Or their junk. Okay, is that? Now, you guys are going to be spending time in these places. When we talk about Siena being a great medieval city, Giuliano being a great medieval city, but in fact, I want to point out something really important to keep in mind. They're medieval in terms of their layout. However, hardly any medieval houses survive. When you see houses in these cities, they're largely late medieval or Renaissance. And the reason is this, is that people have to live in houses, and this is the thing that's going to be updated. You got to remember that medieval houses did not have indoor fireplaces. They had little braziers. They had wooden shutters that they opened up. They didn't have glass on them. Here's very rare survivors of medieval houses. They don't have much privacy, etc. They're just outside of Fort Home. And the windows would be small, as I said, and just with wooden shutters. Yeah?
What was the reason again for the protrusion of the upper stories?
Well, that's a matter of debate. And frankly, there's this ancient legend that you have these protrusions of upper stories so that the lady can walk nearest to the house in case anybody's dumping their chamber pot there. And she won't get hit on the head. Now, that's a very old myth that really nobody believes. Frankly, what it is in many cases, like with half-timbered housing, is part of a function of the joinery of the timbers, because you weaken it too much if you have two many things coming in at the exact same time. They're probably grabbing a little bit of public space. Okay. Todi, Umbria, Piazza del Todi. What does survive from the Middle Ages, besides the layout in these places, are what? Well, they are surviving city halls and churches, largely. Now, sometimes you'll see some buildings with Gothic ornamentation on them. Sometimes there'll be Gothic revival that look like houses, or there'll be late medieval houses that have been altered and made essentially useful by the advent of indoor plumbing, heating, fireplaces, etc. But remember, I said that cities competed during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance to see who could build the most beautiful town hall and the most beautiful cathedral. Because people did not identify as Italians. They did not identify as Belgians. They identified as Romans, as Florentines, as Pisans. And so local people were willing to put a lot of money into their local facilities to essentially be an expression of that regional pride. So that's why you'll see those places. And what you'll also see is the Italians have a much better sense of what makes the good life. Long lunches, Prosecco, etc. But again, to be in these places and literally see the passage of time, as in the case of worn stone, leading the staircase to this little house is, again, an experience we really just don't get here in the States. So, town halls, Perugia, a place that if you guys want to go is a wonderful city. You want to take the Amanda Knox tour, I'm sure you would know. You guys know who she is? Or never mind. Anyway, here's their town hall, which has a beautiful chamber on the inside. Just remember, in the Middle Ages, despite the fact that Gothic is most popular, they still use some round arches. Or Pistoia. Pistoia is really close to Florence. It's part of the Florentine Republic. And there's a wonderful series of buildings that really echo some of the stuff that you see in Florence in terms of the Romanesque, with that wonderful striped decorative architecture you can see here. So this is the cathedral in Pistoia. That's this great tower where they essentially continue that wonderful little decorative detail at the top, or their baptistry. Remember what you'll see in Tuscany, again, is this similar pattern of these separated out buildings as part of the cathedral complex, which really differs from the rest of Europe pretty substantially. But again, wonderful patterns of that dark stone and white marble. Siena. So, medieval Siena, organic pattern of development, but again, except for the maybe lower 1 or 2 stories, hardly anything that you see in this image is actually medieval. It's going to be built later. But, what do we notice about it? Well, remember from my classes before, I'm going to be repeating some stuff, is that Siena became a city by 3 towns going together. And they were on 3 ridges, essentially. 3 ridges. They grew into a great city. And once they decided to kind of become a single commune, a single city, they will create a series of great buildings to express that city pride. Now, the images we're going to be seeing show Siena as very prosperous, its fanciest buildings during this period, but I want to remind you that, in fact, most people didn't live in nice buildings made out of masonry. A large number of people who were poor, they live in horrible little hovels. In fact, a large population of Siena lived in caves that were carved into the cliff sides because that was cheaper housing. But it became a very powerful city, as you can see, and it's still magnificent today with its terracotta roofs. In fact, Siena is a color that has been inspired by the kind of rusty tone that Siena has. But when you go to a city like this, you'll also note that, well, there's going to be parish churches, that is neighborhood churches, in addition to the major Duomo. And even today in Siena, there are 17 distinct neighborhoods that are all very proud, and they have their own flags. So that identification goes even further beyond the city. But as you can see, a rather steep hillside. Well, a city this big on a hilltop, you should wonder, where's the water coming from? Well, they always had a problem with that, and in fact, underlying Siena, it's like 50 or 60 miles of tunnels to get to water sources, to bring water into the city. But an astonishing place that has 2 major public open areas around the cathedral and then here. We'll talk about the cathedral, and then we'll talk about this place that many of you have memorized in my classes, the Capo. But it's a great cathedral, as you can see here, is a superb example of Tuscan architecture of the Middle Ages, that continuing love of black and white striped marble. And rather perversely, they continue that horizontal striping, despite the fact that for most people, Gothic was a vertical language, and you think they'd want to emphasize the vertical. It doesn't bother them. The other thing is about the Italians is that they're not going to skeletonize their Gothic buildings nearly as much, because the light is, first of all, brighter and stronger there. They also have an attachment to those walls, which are great opportunities for wall paintings on the inside. So you won't see the lacy kind of pulled apart buildings that you see in the high Gothic in a place like Germany or France or England. They also have an attachment to their own local heritage, that is the horizontality of classicism, but also things like domes. They're going to continue to build in places like Siena. They'll give Brunelleschi a little leg up when he starts essentially his experiments, although his dome is going to be enormous compared to the dome at Siena. There it is from below. Again, those great horizontal lines, and you can see how tall the facade is compared to the rest of the building. But an amazingly ornamental facade that again differs somewhat from what you would see in Northern Europe when it comes to the Gothic. Well, one of the things is that they're going to adopt a lot of Gothic details that have been invented in the North, like those little crockets, those flame-like things, the little pinnacles and other quatrefoils and trefoils. There's going to be a kind of eating away at the facade, but they're going to use marble. And remember, in Northern Europe, they're mostly using limestone. So it's going to have a higher polish to it. And they're also going to inlay it with lots of mosaics. You really don't see that on the outside of churches in Northern Europe. And they're going to have lots of wonderful statuary on it as well. So we get no flying buttresses on the outside of this building, as you can see. But many of you know that, in fact, there was a great competition between Siena and Florence that, in fact, led to wars and battles and fights, etc. And that eventually Siena lost that fight. But what's amazing about this church is that it was so impressive and big and beautiful. That was one of the stimuli for rebuilding the Duomo in Florence, was to keep up with the Sienese. Well, once the Florentines had done that, well, then the Sienese were a little pissed off that they had been, their private place had been taken. So they actually proposed expanding the church enormously and turning the old cathedral into the transept of a new church, and started building the aisle of a great nave this way. They have open-air films here at night during the summertime. They started that. But, as most of you know, something interrupted it. And what would that be? Well, first of all, Siena had labor problems in the 14th century. Siena was very important in the wool trade, exceedingly important in the wool trade. But the workers started to rally and object to their conditions and wanting more pay. And in a very notorious incident, the people of Siena, that is the movers and shakers who had rights, and to have a right in a city, you had to have a certain amount of property, own a house, etc., massacred their workers. Literally, they massacred their textile workers. Now you would think, it's really the case of cutting off your nose to spite your face, because if you don't have any workers, you're not going to produce anything. So economically, they really damaged themselves terribly. And then they started this like in the 1320s or 30s, and then most of you know, 1347, 1348, they would be visited by the plague. Those pictures, I guess, did not make it into it. The plague had an enormous influence on the life of medieval Italy. Remember, Florence lost up to 3/4 to 4/5 of its people. It recovered. Siena, though, as I said, massacred lots of its working class and will be vulnerable to eventually Florence taking it over and conquering it. But when you go to Siena, right in front of the door, entrance to Siena is this. And it's one of the surviving medieval hospitals. And it's meant to serve pilgrims and other people who are coming by to visit this place. Unlike Florence, Siena produced 4 great saints, natives, including St. Catherine of Siena, whose head is in here, who you can visit among her relics. She died in Rome, but they got the head here. And so people were coming, this is on the pilgrimage route going south to Rome, and if people fell sick, well, this is what happens. Apparently some guy who was traveling as a pilgrim who was very wealthy fell sick here, donated money essentially for the building of this hospital, which is open for you to visit. But of course, the most important public space of all is that great public space that the Sienese perversely refuse to essentially refer to as the piazza, but in fact it's called the campo. You might remember me saying in class that campo means field or open space. Well, in fact, it was an open space initially, because this is kind of where the 3 cities grew together. And so wisely, in a kind of dip down towards the edge, they built this great public square. So it's a planned incursion into an otherwise organically developed city. Sloped up that side, and they're going to build an enormous city hall, one that will be one of the most beautiful of all of Italy, and it opens up out the back. And in fact, farmers would come up the back side, they still do today, unload their goods when their market days here. So the campo. Now, Siena originally had lots of house towers. All of them will be cut down except those associated with the government and with religion, just like it was before. So here's an edge of what it might have looked like around 1400. A great square, a public square, that is the heart of Florence, and today is filled with cafes, etc. Pardon? Siena, sorry. Siena, with great sloping sides, as you can see. But one of the things I want to say is, again, you've got to remember that these are going to be the center of social life. And one of the reasons why people want to live in cities is other than being rich and maybe being free of peasant life, is that they provide entertainments. It's not so boring as being down on the farm. It's that song, how they get to keep them down on the farm once they've seen Gay Paris. Well, once they've seen Siena, how are they going to stay away? So they would set up these temporary bleachers, as you can see, and have these great fence where there would be bullfighting, and they would dress these kind of machines up with people or picadors and ostriches and cattle, etc. They would harass the bulls. There's some bear baiting going on. They're going to have markets here, and of course, the ever-popular executions, which would also take place here. They would erect scaffolding for people to be executed on, and something that people often sought. You can see here is an amazing fountain that we'll look at in a second, but there's also an open-air chapel, because there would be certain days that they would have festivals where literally they would have an open-air mass. And even today, there's a very famous race. It's one of the holdovers of these medieval entertainments that were so common in cities. I think I mentioned to you guys in class that in Rome they used to have races of old men and Jews and stuff. They would force to race. Naked old men, even weirder. And people would place bets on them. But they had this famous horse race every year, the Palio, in the summer. And those are all flags for different neighborhoods in Florence, and each one enters a horse, and it races through the town and culminates there in front of the Palazzo Pubblico, their town hall. So that's what they call theirs. In fact, in Italy, the name of their town halls differs from town to town, but they all essentially have the same function. Starts in the late 1200s. It's later, this little wing is added up a little further. The campanile is finished in the mid-1300s, meant to compete with the other tall tower in town, which is obviously the church, the cathedral. And it is a handsome and glorious place, as you can see. And as I mentioned to you, one of the provisions in the Constitution of Siena is this, that they promulgated after building this Palazzo Pubblico. They required, one of the responsibilities of the city councilors of this city was to maintain the beauty of the city. And so in fact they passed a law that said the buildings surrounding the rest of the Campo had to be harmonized with the Palazzo Pubblico. So there's aesthetic planning going back to the 1300s, right? Again, great tower, which you can walk to the top of, which is an amazing view. And here's one of those buildings around the square that dates from that period that shows that. So again, aesthetic planning is not new. It goes way back. But there's also a symbol of the politics here in the city, because you might remember that, first of all, in the Campo, one of the things that really distinguishes it is that it's paved. Not many places are paved, period. It's paved with brick. Different colors of brick, and it's divided into 9 wedges. Those represent the 3 council seats for each of those villages that grew together. So there were 9 council men at the heart of the council. Like many republics, that is free cities that didn't have a duke over them, they had a government. You had, again, be wealthy enough to be within that part of the government. But they had different bodies of different sizes. There's the council of 9. There's a larger council of like a 7, etc. The 9 who elected here lived here in this building in the Palazzo Pubblico for a period of 3 months. So there's a chapel inside for them, there's a place for them to sleep, a place for them to eat, in case there's any emergencies that they have to decide upon. And there's going to be a podesta, an air sheriff. You guys talk about this in class, or does the book, the Dome book?
Well, they had similar government structure in Florence where they served for 2 months and had to live in the Palazzo
Right.
similar.
Well, what's interesting is that, as you know, these cities were really riven by internal strife. They weren't necessarily all fighting each other, they were fighting themselves within the same city. They were divided largely into 2 different kind of political groups, the Guelphs and the Ghibellines. So what they would do is hire a sheriff, a podesta, and they usually would only hire a sheriff from far away who had no vested interest in the town, who would come to be a neutral arbiter. So there's a very famous one, there's a portrait of him, a mural in the Florence Cathedral, of an Englishman who essentially was brought in as their sheriff. Beautiful fountain. This was redone in the Renaissance, but obviously is providing the important function of providing water to people. Beautiful fountain. But the inside of the Siena, you're going to go inside the cathedral, which I didn't show pictures of, which is breathtaking and magnificent. Every surface is amazing. It has, sorry, I didn't have a picture of this, but it's paving. You've got to look really closely at the paving of the cathedral at Siena. It's done in these pieces of marble that are put together like pictures. And they depict all these biblical scenes. And there's no other cathedral that has the extent of that kind of artistry on the inside. It has an amazing early Renaissance library, the Piccolo Mini Library, with stunning frescoes. And then other incredible architectural details. But the Palazzo Pubblico is famous for its civically minded art. Of course, there's never a complete separation of church and state, so here is this famous image where people would meet in front of it, representing the Virgin and Child, and the patrons of the city, and then saints around them. So inside the Palazzo Pubblico are going to be spaces for people to meet. And probably the most famous series of frescoes are going to be this. They're done by a man called Lorenzetti, the 1330s, 1320s. And these images are the allegory of good and bad government. So they're meant to be kind of cautionary tales to the people of Siena to ensure that they behave themselves. And what they are showing is, again, lots of allegorical figures. I think this is wisdom up here. Here's a kind of representative of the government. Everybody is happy and prosperous. And on the right-hand side is this. One of the most important images that survives to tell us what life in a medieval city was like, or what they wanted it to be like. Because what it is actually Siena. It's a portrait at that time. Now notice again, the buildings are 2 to 3 stories. That's about as high as they got during the Middle Ages. And these would be, again, the houses of the wealthy people. But what does it show us? Well, there's lots of building going on. It's got a thriving economy, right? It's got, again, you'll look in vain for glass. Actually, you'll see wooden shutters and stuff, because glass was prohibitively expensive. Here, women doing some kind of dance. I don't know if it's religiously based or otherwise. There's people gambling. There's a market. Here's a little school with kids in it. Look at that image really closely, because this is what they aspired to. Now remember, this is painted before the Black Plague comes and wipes out such masses of people, but it shows a happy, prosperous city with merchants moving through it, more borrowed space, right? The public realm, stuff that's handily renowned. And it's remarkable. So even though you can still see those house towers in the back, and they're short for this particular painting, so there's still all these turf battles within the city and fights and murders. This is what they're aspiring to. Now you usually see the good government side. And part of it also reminds you of this, is that the city is depending upon its local agricultural areas. Because Siena was its own republic. Remember, it controlled a fairly large area. And there are markets, and people are bringing their products to market. And again, it's representing a happy, prosperous place. You have nobles here. One of them has this falcon. Here's a peasant driving a pig to market. Apparently that variety of pig is still farmed in this area. But you have bad government. So you can see here. And when you have bad government, things are terrible. There's robbery, murder, pestilence, etc. So again, it's something you want to avoid. Okay, we have to hit the slides. Okay. This off? You know how you turn this off? Just one. To the top. Oh, chair for the top. It goes at the top. Sorry about this.
And stand up and take a,
Pardon?
step and take a stretch, 7-inch stretch.
It's not going to last that much.
We go by weekend every we go into the room and we see it right
Now,
on Saturday.
are any of you planning on going to Pisa? All right.
Leaving town.
Well, especially you engineers.
Aren't they fixing it at the moment?
It's fixed.
It's fixed?
It is fixed. You can go up in it for 20 euros. But
How'd
you
they
can
do
do
it?
You go, you see, you're like, what? And you can go in the
Okay. So, Pisa is part of Tuscany. And with Siena, was the major rival of Florence as well. Until, again, they will eventually fall with its own government. And Pisa, being where the Arno close to the sea, was very well suited to 2008. It's very effective. Some of you, I hope, remember from my class that Pisa Navy had a great victory over Arab forces off the coast of Sicily. They captured a number of ships and held them in trade. And so they're going to come back. They're going to express their by building an entirely new cathedral complex. Again, this is one of the great exceptions within Italian history because, first of all, they buy a big piece of land just outside what was then the city walls. All the other cathedrals are right within the city, right? And they call that area the Campo dei Miracoli, that is the field of miracles, because they ascribed their victory over the Arabs to the intervention of the Virgin Mary. And they're going to devote a tremendous amount of wealth to building this complex. Now, it's going to take a long time, like most of these places. It's really 150 to 100 years, but it's got four things. There's four things that you usually, three of the things you usually expect within an Italian Duomo complex, but not separated out on a big piece of grass or lawn. It's got a capilla, it's got a cathedral, it's got a baptistry, and it has this Campo Santo. But it has this very open and spacious kind of complex. It's rather unique and beautiful. And otherwise, as you can see, Sienna's are rather flat. Excellent. So there are the four parts. So they're showing off, essentially. And remember, they're showing off for their neighbors, for their competitors, people like Florence and And it's got that huge round baptistry that is on axis with the cathedral the same way it is in Florence. And it's going to be built. It's going to take a while to finish it. One thing you might notice is there's a different kind of roofing on these sides next to it. Yeah.
The Campo Santo instead of.
We'll talk about that at the end.
Okay.
But if you look here, these look like two different buildings. The facade facing the cathedral, facing the Virgin, they have marble on it. The facade away from it, it has terracotta tiles. The city will come. Okay? It's kind of fun. It starts in the Romanesque, like San Deniato al Monte that was talked about in these lectures, a wonderful Tuscany Romanesque with the green and white striped marble. And then it starts to shift into Gothic in terms of its completion. But it's a great dome, the biggest dome built in the Middle Ages before the Renaissance. Looks like a huge dipple. Now, but let's deal with next year. But in fact, they came up with a really ingenious solution, as you know, because it's a two-part dome. And this is before Brunelleschi came up with his scheme, although it's a very different scheme than what Brunelleschi came up with. But as you can see there, it's got a central cone, and then the brick dome on the outside is supported on that cone. But a dramatic space inside does not have the amazing mosaics that the Florentine baptistry has. It's still a remarkable accomplishment, and again, it shows the ambitions of the Italians to replicate the accomplishments of their forebears back in the classical Europe. That is the idea of the dome. Next to it. It has within it some wonderful statuary, including a pulpit. There is a family of sculptors here that are confusingly called Pisano, or Pisani, plural. But various Pisanos, from Pisa, who did such advanced sculpture that it's really going to be a foretaste of the Renaissance, 150 years before the Renaissance. Next to it. And then the great cathedral. In fact, the cathedral, when they first built it, was a simple basilica with no transepts. But they quickly decided to expand it, make it more ambitious, as you can see here. And what you'll notice is that they are picking up on that idea, that kind of lacy screen in front of the building. Now, this is a tendency or a tradition that was just local to this part of Tuscany, because they still have that green and white banded marble, nice rounded arches. But these screens are really pretty amazing, because they essentially, those arcades have a way of dematerializing the structure, making it lacy, making it less heavy. They also represent a certain amount of expense, too. And those are not cheap to make. They're made with very colorful marbles. It's hard to often see the slides they did on there. But it's different. They could have had just a flat facade, like you see on the sides, on the transepts, but they go to the effort of creating these lacy, delicate arcades next to it. So here's the original one that they expanded to a much more grandiose scale, as you can see, with in fact a crossing dome, a pointed dome, but again a thin shell of brick, much smaller than that of the Duomo. Next. Grady building, more of those lacy arcades next to it. And then it's rather amazing interior, where that banding continues on the inside, rather glorious manner. But look again, these arcades, how wide they are with round arches, and very classically proportionally detailed columns. The Italians have a really hard time embracing the Gothic with both hands. Not narrow rectangular bays, not those compound colonnettes, but instead, in this case, almost a classical basilican colonnade down there. That says something again about the personality of the Italians and their attachment. Beautiful coffered roof. Well, in fact, that was not original. That is done in the Renaissance, in the classical revival style, and there's a fire. It's got an amazing pulpit by one of the design next to it. There's the pulpit in there. There's the ocean out there. Pisa is still very close to the sea. Yes. And yes, you all heard about the Leaning Tower. Happening to remember my joke? They kept leaning and leaning and leaning until it came to rest on the foot of this angel. And it was truly a miracle. But anyway, it started leaning early on. It started leaning early on so that, in fact, if they decided to turn it upright like this to a complete level position, it would curve slightly that way. Because in the upper floors here, when they built them over 150 years, they tried to correct it. But yeah, it kept tilting and tilting. But again, what we have here is this breathtaking arcade that dematerializes the structure that makes it lacy and elegant. Many of you might remember me saying in class that we're lucky this thing survives. The Germans who controlled Pisa were using it as a lookout tower when the Americans were advancing up the Italian peninsula during World War II. And apparently we tried to hit it, and we missed. We did something else, I'll show you what that. But considering it was world famous by this point for its leading quality, I think that would consider the Italians would have hard time activities for keeping them liberated. Next to. Well, many of you know that in fact this is the site of a great engineering accomplishment, and that an American engineer, I forget his name, was in charge essentially of trying to stabilize the Leaning Tower. And what they did is they essentially put big cords around the edge of it, as you can see. They then put in hydraulic pumps to suck out some of the sand, essentially kind of try to help level it out. And they were able to shift it a couple of feet. So much so that they don't think it's in danger of falling, so that they will allow people up there now. It's very expensive. It's like 20 euros so you can get up to the top. But doing that, remember, I hope you remember that when you walk up the steps to the top, you'll be tracing the same steps that Galileo took when he went to the top to make his famous experiment about mass. Things fall at different rates from the top of this cathedral as it was the next. The last thing that Simon asked about was the Campo Santo. The field, the sacred field. This was a cemetery. They actually sent a galleon to the Holy Land to get dirt that they brought back here in this place so that people could be buried on holy ground. Because they weren't burying people in this cathedral so much as they were going to do it in this Campo Santo. So it is a separated out and it's sacred field where people can be buried literally in the land of the Bible. It's mostly Romanesque on the outside, completed with the Gothic on the inside next to it. It's got some amazing tombs and stuff, but this is what was hit by the bombs instead of the Leaning Tower. And what was damaged was, originally there was an amazing series of frescoes on the inside. And you can see one surviving bit. And it's actually the triumph of death. So you have this party of people coming upon some dead and decaying bodies, and they're covering their noses, right, the smell. And what's the message here? Well, of course, it's a memento mori. Remember death. Always remember death. Someday you're going to be facing it. Be aware of the afterlife. Don't forget about your responsibilities. Try to get to heaven. So, it's a wonderful complex to walk through. Next to it. And there are a gazillion tourists there. Because buses get out and just discharge them, right? And even cruise ships. But beyond the Campo di Miracole, there are other wonderful things in Pisa, because it was a very important town. here's this little glorious Gothic chapel right by the river, Santa Maria della Spina, Our Lady of the Thorn, because they had a relative here called the Florence from Christ's crown. And it has that great combination that you can see here, pink and white and green and marble that we see in Florence. Well, one thing I forgot to mention to you, some people even think that the colors of Florence Cathedral were an attempt to avoid up the Sienese. Siena Cathedral is all blackish green and white. Florence Cathedral is pink, white, and green. So it's even richer by having one extra color. But this one actually has that as well. It's a glorious little chapel. But as you can see, it's a pretty city. That's the Arno right there that has flowed through the city of Florence, eventually next to it. And there's other great things to see. The Casa of the Hours, as you can see, there's that clock on it. Things from the Renaissance and from the Manners period. And here's a wonderful example of actually surviving arsenal and boat yards from the 16th century. A lot of those utilitarian structures built for things like this that once graced all these cities are gone. Venice has a great collection. Pisa has some, Barcelona has some. Next. Now, just a hop, skip, and a jump from Pisa is Lucca. Now, Lucca is really a beautiful city, and it doesn't have nearly the number of tourists. So if you decide to go to Pisa, I would suggest a good trip for 2 days would be Pisa and Lucca. Spend the night in Lucca. Spend the day in Pisa and then go to Lucca, because Lucca has not nearly as many tourists. It's an elegant city, very beautiful, organically developed, although it once had lots of house towers, as you can see, for protecting themselves. But it's got this feature, which you guys should remember from my class. Next, on this side, which is obviously this piazza that is maintaining the open space of the former Roman amphitheater. Roman amphitheater is all gone. The open space is still. Well, again, what's kind of amazing about it, you might remember me saying in class, if you want immortality, be an engineer, not an architect. Because if you plot something on the ground, a road, or the open space, you have a much better chance of achieving immortality than having that stuff survive than if you do a building which can be torn down. So you'll be seeing that circuit of streets that forms the outline of the amphitheater in Florence. Here's again, those are really survivors. Next, Lucca has a large number of Art Nouveau buildings. It also has its surviving ramparts around the city that were added during the Renaissance. Remember, the French introduced a very advanced form of cannon. They could blow holes in those old castles around 1400, so they had to refortify everything. They spent a tremendous amount of money doing that. That is, with great earthen and stone ramparts that could take the impact of cannon balls. So it has those ramparts that are now planted. Next on the right. And it has a wonderful series of really beautiful churches that obviously show the influence of Pisan culture, that is, with those lazy arcades. But a beautiful city, again, not overwhelmed with tourists. And a really lovely place if you have time to go to. You should see these churches. Next. Well, last but not least, San Gimignano, a place that you all had to memorize that they're going to try to get you to in this class in the late afternoon. That's probably good because San Gimignano is also a place that is kind of set upon by tourists who arrive in buses. But largely they leave in the late afternoon, which is nice, and that's when you're going to be going. You'll be having the sunset there. Well, it is the surviving hill town with surviving house towers. That's what's given San Gimignano all its name. It originally had 70 of them. And again, remember, they're building these not to protect themselves from external enemies, but from each other. Literally from each other. They had competitions in the town to see who could build the tallest. Don't be afraid to figure that one. So anyway, it's a hill town that still has 13 of these house towers. Now Florence has the stumps of a few of them. It once had hundreds of them. But this does have them. So it has this unique surviving appearance. Now once these were ubiquitous throughout Europe, but this is the one that still gives you an impression of what it's like, this kind of spiky skyline. Next. It was a town that was actually settled during the Etruscan times. Walls were built to protect against external enemies in the 9th, the 10th, and 11th centuries AD. But that most of the house towers date to the 12th and 13th centuries AD. Organically developed on the hilltop, as you can see here, with a fortified castle there. Here's the patron saint, Mr. San Gimignano himself. And he's holding the city protected in his lap. You can see all those house towers. Next. It has its arches, its entrances into the city, and again, the way it stretches along this ridge is rather glorious. And you can see around it is very fertile countryside, wine growing, olive growing, etc. It's really good food. Next. This is the largest public space, Piazza della Cisterna. It's paved. It's paved because, in fact, there's a great underground, under-pavement cistern there to collect rainwater. Again, water is a precious commodity, especially on a hill town. You would get your water by going to that well. Piazza della Cisterna. Triangle. Now, I have a couple recommendations. Over here is a restaurant that's really good. It has views out of the countryside. So think about that. But on this part, not the pointy part, but on this long side of the square, is the world's best gelato. I'm not kidding you. It's so incredible. They use all this fresh fruit. I have like white peach ones, and they have champagne grapefruit. Oh, Jesus. Anyway, $10 just going back one day, again and again. It is so unbelievable. And they have pictures of stars who've been in there, like Lily Tomlin, etc., because they filmed a film here called Tea with Mussolini, and the kind of culminating scenes are in this town. So they were there for the film. So, next one. This is its town hall. It's town hall, which has been organically developed or assembled over time. As Cyril Costa said, the city assembled. I love this because you have 2 stairs and a ramp. There it is. It's got the tallest tower of all, in an attempt of the government to assert its preeminence over all the private citizens. Dante once gave a speech to the people of San Gimignano at this mountain as the ambassador from Florence. And off to the side is their little Duomo. They have a series of wonderful little churches. The Duomo is relatively small. Next. I don't know if it's a Duomo anymore. Rather plain on the outside, Romanesque, as you can see. Very simple, not a lot of money, but the inside is really rather pleasant with some nice frescoes. Next. So, I would suggest climbing to the top of the City Hall's tower if it's open, if you're there for the visit, and then wandering around these glorious streets once all of the German tourists have left. This is great. Lots of development. Now this is a town that, despite all these rivalries that really afflicted Italian towns, remember, I think somebody already told you that at a certain point, all these civic governments declared that you had to cut down the house towers because they realized they're really hurting themselves. They were stunting their economy, etc., by having all these fights within their own cities. So cities like Florence and Siena, etc., said that's it, cut them all down. So what you'll see is just a few rare survivals. In the case of San Gimignano, it had been conquered by Siena earlier. And I don't know if there was ever a government regulation to cut them all down, but obviously it was never carried out, so they had 13 survive. Now the families that built them would use them for storage as well. You know, still, it's kind of an amazing example of waste that's so picturesque to our modern sensibility, but think about what it was for. It was about protecting yourself from your enemies, your neighbors. I mean, it's really pretty wild. At the base, further down the hill, well, there's a natural spring where they built a laundry, so the civic government is exerting its ability to take care of all of its citizens. It's still there, medieval laundry. Students would go down and actually wash their clothes. And lots of these places don't survive. It's more utilitarian places. San Gimignano actually. So you're about to embark on a great journey, and embrace it as fully as you can possibly. And that's it. Any questions? And also, I gotta say, if you want to send me an email while you're over there saying you decided to go to this place, what should we not miss? I'll answer it. I'd require you to read back gelato with you, but it's not going to work. You're lucky for that. Any questions? Kids, any questions? Yeah,
How did they tear down the house towers? Yeah.
from the top.
What was the idea that they were shooting bows and arrows at one another?
I'm not kidding you. They were also just safe places because they were fireproof.
Yeah.
Down to the base, you'd have a big strong thing. And yeah, you would throw rocks at your enemies, you would shoot arrows out. It was wild. I mean, it's just, again, imagine on this neighborhood, Hauser, and every third house having a house guard protecting every other house down the street. I mean, it's tricky, but that's really what it was for. I mean, it's almost, when I first heard this, I couldn't believe it. I thought, oh, come on, this is ridiculous. You know, but it's true. You guys are going to Rome? Rome? You're going to see the Pantheon? Inside, right? St. Peter's? Inside?
Did the soccer game go on that day too?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it'd be really easy to get tickets.
I know that. That was silly.
Okay. Anything else?
So I need you to stop, I'll pass these out, this revised itinerary. Again, these are posted online, I updated it.
Is this the final one?
Well, it still says, well, it doesn't say on this version, but it's going to be subject to change, but I'm getting closer to it. You know, some of you, I think, have told me that you've got parents maybe visiting you, that sort of thing, so we're gonna try really hard to keep this to be the final, but do be prepared for some flexibility. You never know what could happen. There could be a strike, we'd have to, or it could be torrential rain, and so we'll say, oh, we have to go be inside today instead of going out to see the village, that sort of thing. But I do want you to take a hard look at this, and when you're thinking about your papers and uploading it, if you wouldn't mind making a comment about where you would like to deliver your report. We're talking about a 5 to 10 minute report. This is not us, you reading your report out loud, okay? This is you sort of being conversational with us, okay?
Is it fair to say too that we probably want to do about 2 of these a day, right?
That's right.
So, you know, we need to get them lined up.
Yeah.
Is it us kind of just like talking about our paper and just talking to everyone?
Yeah.
Nothing like super.
No, well, you're going to be right there, and the building or thing's going to be there, the open space, and you're going to talk.
Yeah.
Intelligent.
You're not going to have a microphone or anything. Yeah.
I know for my paper, I'm having issues finding enough information about the single villa because it's not one of the more famous villas in the
Okay.
area. So can I expand it to like just kind of the general villas around it with a specific focus on that one?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Right. And you'll notice that some of the days have changed around from where they were before because I realized, oh, you know, the Davidsati is closed on Tuesdays or whatever. So I couldn't go when I wanted to go. But I can tell you that it was touch and go there for a minute, but I did hear back from our friends, the architects, who will be joining us going to Antonori Vineyard, and they have invited us to their office. So it's so awesome. It's going to be very cool. I also want to remind you that have uploaded the videos onto the website. They're all sort of in a YouTube sort of playlist, including this bonus one that John Connington recorded for us on the Florence Library, which we will also go to, which is Michelangelo's amazing staircase. Okay, so you'll notice also that I'm going to let you go after the morning of the Friday. So if you are planning to try to get someplace, that gives you some time to catch a train or bus. Yeah.
On the 11th, is that a typo? They're doing like,
20:45. That's
I
8:45.
would say 0.
0 hours, midnight?
Where?
Probably.
That's
That's probably 9.
Yeah, 9 or 10.
On the 11th after breakfast.
Buses, yeah.
Sorry. Yes, that's a typo. 9 o'clock bus. Right.
You guys, in terms of your little trips, you should really be aware that they do have stripes. And definitely go on the internet before you go away from Florence to make sure that you will be able to arrive and come back.
May I also make a plug for staying in Florence for the weekend? Your room is paid for, okay? You're not going to get any refund back. We've talked about this before. So your room is paid for. You are welcome to stay there. We are not planning to visit as a group the Uffizi. So if you have any interest in seeing Botticelli or, you know, oh my God, it's just, I can't even, I get chills thinking about all the amazing stuff that's at the Uffizi, the main art gallery, okay? So if you think you might want to stick around in town and go to that, you really must reserve ahead of time, okay? So get a reservation for that weekend. We're not going to go see the original Michelangelo's David in the Academia. So if you want to see that, you might want to stay in Florence. You might feel as though, when it boils down to it, we've got basically 6.5 days in Florence proper. So you might feel that that's not enough. So if you want to keep things loose, you can decide this when you get there. But I recommend, I want to make a plug for staying in Florence and getting to know a little bit.
And you can get to Pisa like in an hour, so you can easily go there and come back. Spend it
Yeah.
and save your money.
And that's the other thing, is, yeah, you can take a train there and come back and spend the night in Florence at night. And then the next day you can go someplace else. My sister-in-law and her family went to the Cinque Terre. They woke up at the crack of dawn, got a bus tour out there, went to, I think, each of the 5 towns along the coast and got back by 10 that night. So it's possible to do that, right? So it's a long day, but do that, and like I said, your room's already paid for. Now, the yellow things on here, the little yellow highlighted things, are days when you're gonna need to bring some cash along to buy lunch. Okay, so the most breakfasts, except for one day, are covered in your trip costs, and 6 dinners at the hotel are covered. If you know that you're not going to be there for one of those nights, I need to know, because by the 20th, I need to let where we're staying know how many people are going to be eating each night. They want to plan that, okay? So, and if it's not in yellow, you've already paid for it. Yeah.
They're gonna have like meatless options.
Yes. And they are aware of the peanut allergy and anything else you might have developed in the You're a pescatarian or something. Do you have a question for you? Okay. I'm gonna, in the meantime, I'm gonna pass out little yellow cards, and I need you to get a pen out so that you can take some notes on it, all right? This is kind of old-fashioned technology, but they're important.
And you want them right back, right?
No, you're gonna hang out. Yeah,
If we arrive a day before,
yes.
do we have like we have to figure out our own weird place for
Your friends already did. But you'll probably have to switch rooms. No, I know. This is their wallet. But I was just telling you about it's such a your wallet. You're gonna go with it. So, quiet, everybody. Attenzione. So, I'm gonna give you the consulate number that I looked up. Okay. God forbid you find yourself needing to talk to the American government while you're there. And I'm not there. The consulate number, you ready? 055 266 951. That's a 24-hour number. 951. Okay, the police emergency number, in case you get What? It's really 6 digits. 055 is their area code. 055 is Florence. Okay? The 911 equivalent number, this is the police emergency, is 113. Okay? I don't have these. Pardon me?
113 number? If like you speak, like is that going to be an English speaking?
You should say, may I speak to somebody who speaks English?
Okay.
Okay, same rule everywhere.
Theoretically, if someone have to call.
Maybe I'll have to
Oh, that's true. That would be bad.
We're gonna, I learned something from my colleagues who ran the Discovering Architecture program this summer, that, we need to take roll, make sure everybody's present. So you're each gonna have a number, and you're each gonna have a buddy, okay? So we'll call roll, and we'll probably do it in Italian. So you'll be quattro, you'll be sei, whatever. I'll assign your numbers. And when we're getting ready to move from one place to another, and we want to make sure that we're all together, we'll go through the numbers.
What's buddy in Italian?
Amico, friend. Okay. Where are we at?
Did the summer program have children who were lost or ran away?
They weren't always in the right place at the right time, and everyone knew what O'Trey was. So, but Mark said it before, and it's really important. We have such a short amount of time there. It is critical that you not hold us up, okay? Everyone will be mad at you, but no one will be more mad at you than me. And I can get really mad. And so, not only can you, sort of flunk for screwing things up, but you can also really, really piss everybody off. So let's not do that, okay? Let's be considerate of each other, and let's just be on our best behavior. I'm not okay.
Are we okay that a state that we figure out? I guess
I will get you. I don't know what those mean. General study abroad advisor's name. I believe Donnie Mascarelli is the only person that you really won't know.
Okay.
And these numbers will be good enough for you. If that's not true, I'm meeting with her on Monday to go over some other details, and I decided to tell you other things on here, I will. And lastly, about the phone number thing, next week I hope to be figuring out my telephone thing. I personally have Sprint.
Wait, I was going to tell you, I found out about it. So Sprint does a $4 charge per month for study abroad, like add-on to your account, and they prorate it. So if you start it September 1st,
Yeah.
you can stop it the day you get back, September 18th, and they will only charge you like $2.
Okay.
And what it does is it allows you to have access to all of your phone when you're abroad, data included. But you have to pay then like per text message or per like minute you can talk.
Okay.
But it's only like 10 cents for like a minute and like 10 cents or 12 cents for like a text. So if you wanna, so it would be like probably end up being around $50 for the time you're there. You're texting occasionally, and like you're just texting for emergencies, and you have to pay the $2 for like it would be $4 for the month, but you're only gonna use it for 2 weeks, so $2 for actually just having the plan alone.
Okay.
But they're like, you just call up the Sprint and Sprint International number, and the guy like explains it to you, and it's like,
And we can keep our own number.
yes, yes. And my mom probably did that for me because I have Sprint as well. And then you can call anyone you want, talk to, text anyone you want.
And you don't have to use it, this sounds so stupid, I'm sorry, I don't know this, but I don't have to use my Italy code or my American code, just
No, you just call whatever number, yes.
Well, then I'm gonna give you my number. Let's count on that working right there.
I think you may have to dial 1 because it's international.
Okay.
But other than that, it's not like you have to get a new number or anything.
Okay, cool.
So if you have a smartphone, just download an app and use Wi-Fi. But you have to be Wi-Fi then. Yeah.
There is Wi-Fi at our hotel.
If you want a free.
So, I think it might be kind of useful, for instance, if we say, okay, everyone go get something to eat at the Mercato Centrale and be back here in 10 minutes, whatever, that I might be able to broadcast a text saying, oh, guess what, we have to go to that or something like that. I don't know, but, so I'm gonna try to look to see if there's a way to send out like a mass text. So if anybody doesn't have a phone, then let me know. But my phone is 215-888.
Wait, hold on.
That would be 215-888-6394. Okay? Can't wait to see your papers. I'll be right home. If you have any more.
Has anyone been able to get the on-call insurance to the
No,
certified office?
They charge them.
Yeah.
They don't work.
Like, because I have the on-call insurance, but I can't submit my, like, confirmation of it.
Email them.
Yeah, you gotta email them.
Because just
Or the-
forward their confirmation email them. They probably won't even say anything to you, but on your application, one day it'll randomly be like checked.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do it through the website and it just,
Yeah,
it's telling me again that I need to like resign.
I would
So you gotta email them, then you have my
He
information.
He changed it the day I emailed
all
him.
have to get
Okay.
So she has to get hired, they're supposed to get hired, we all
Charge them. And I talked to
And then
them,
you
they're
have to
like,
be on Wi-Fi, so there's no free.
you want our records?
Any other questions?
Send them my
Unless they
records.
have internet.
And someone was looking for that leftover checkbook, which I have. Can't remember, was that you? Okay. And I also have lots of other, here's three free guidebooks, if anybody wants one of these. Take your pick, whatever you want. Anybody? Okay. Anybody else?
My mom.
Have it? I recommend getting a good map, one of those kind of pocket maps. This is a bad idea, but then again, maybe you have an app that works really well, that's fine too.
For what?
A map.
Oh, a map. I said an app.
Well, you can get an app. App.
I'll get you that book. Yeah, I thought originally that I was meant to like our
I'm just gonna go grab a book, I'll be right back. Does anyone else need to borrow any books?
We have this good printed it out.
They have online sessions, but you have to have a computer with a, and I don't. Yeah, they can do it online, they can do it over here.
Casual Friday.
Well,
Yeah, so looking for a
That's the
job.
only reason I get it. Like at least I can.
I have like 3 possible Me and my
Yeah.
It's signed by the office, so it's very valuable.
Okay, I have a couple of things to say. So, in regards to my paper, you originally commented saying my topic was like a lot, and I worked out there. I'm doing the residential, urban, like I was going to do like all the classes, all the stuff. Yeah, so obviously that's insane, and I realized I was going to make a 50-page paper. So I decided that I think I can find the most research in upper class, like the Blasi and everything like that. And so I think I'm gonna, I mean, I already kind of started doing this, but I'm going to streamline it down to just that class and then comparing it to the palazzo we visit in Florence. And then kind of using that to show how the transition from Renaissance Palazzi to current Palazzi. So currently I'm researching all of the, like the economy in the Renaissance and how the wealth increase had this, gave everyone like this boom in education too, and like theories of Aristotle and then how they use that to build these grand houses of the upper class, and they want to make the upper class become richer through this. Right. And then when I'm gonna have probably like 2 pages or so of my research that won't even be done until I'm actually in these buildings in Florence, and then using a conclusion of how my presentation of the current day Palazzi versus the Renaissance ones I researched and compare.
Not a whole lot of contemporary residential architecture.
Okay. No, I want to compare the the transformation more or less, or like if they're still standing, or if, does that make sense? I know we were.
Well, many of them are going to be staying.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
That is now, okay. Okay.
Might also just
Yeah, her whole beginning was like, I was like, oh.
Yeah, but what's really interesting
But
is
you found that on.
how really subdued the exterior of the things are.
Yeah, it's all about the
All that
interior.
assumption. Yes. Very much. Don't think, you know, by the next it wasn't about.
Oh, no. Oh, it was about, and it was about showing your wealth, though, if you so what you could build.
But you need to see it by the inside.
Okay.
And then also, they start really having the bugs, right, so the first floor
Okay.
was really a lot. Stores for trade, you know.
Okay.
Stores here, and down there. So that the piano mosaic, that might be a really interesting concept.
Okay.
So what are you saying, are we picking first?
Second floor. Okay.
So that might be no feel as though you have to.
Yeah,
They can
yeah.
find it.
Yeah.
The few things.
Okay.
And don't worry about it.
But does it feel?
Yeah. The garden. And you know, we want it to show them. So we want to do. We also go to the document.
Okay.
Are we, this is what I just saw. Another, what else is
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at. RUC ratio.
Shall I? So
Yeah,
we'll see the outside of that.
Okay.
That's been converted. But also, I didn't realize that